And welcome back to another video from HSTV. Now today's video is going to be all about Ucat and how you can save some time. So I'm going to give you 5 top tricks and tips that I used and that I would recommend that you use in order to save yourself a few seconds or milliseconds here and there. Now, just to clarify what the Ucat is, just quickly, if you don't want to know this and you already know, skip like 20 seconds ahead. So the Ucat is essentially the University Clinical Aptitude Test, and it's the entrance exam that universities in the UK use in order to see where applicants rank, and then they can give you interviews on the basis of it, and it just makes up a part of your application. So the Ucat itself doesn't have very difficult questions. It's quite basic arithmetic, patterns, you have to try and recognize patterns, read passages, bit of comprehension. But the thing that makes it difficult is the amount of questions you have to answer in a very short space of time. So I thought that I would make this video to give you a few shortcuts you can use in order to save those very precious seconds and hopefully do well. So let's get on to it. Alright, so the first tip that I'm going to give you is learn the keyboard shortcuts. What I mean by this is that rather than you having to keep on clicking the mouse to go to the previous question or flag a question, if you know the keyboard shortcuts, it's very easy to just sort of do them. And I'm going to list some of the keyboard shortcuts that I used. There might be a few more, but these are the main ones that I think you should really know about. So the first one is Alt-P. Alt-P will make you go back to the previous question. Alt-N, which is go to the next question. Alt-F if you want to flag a question, and this can be useful if you have any time left at the end of a section. You can go back and review that question. Or you can do Alt-C for the calculator, and with the calculator use the keypad on your keyboard. Don't use the mouse to click the numbers. So I think that is my first tip, and hopefully it will save you some time. Alright, tip number 2, make an educated guess. Now that's pretty vague and easier said than done. I completely get it, I've been there. However, what I'm going to say is that you will not know the answer to every question. And if you do, great. Don't watch this part of the video. But personally, I didn't know the answer to every single question, and most importantly, I didn't have time to work out the answer for every question. So if you think you're in a bit of a situation where the question is really long, or you think it's not worth you spending all this time, then make a guess. So normally there will be at least one option that's quite far off, and you might be like, it doesn't fit in with what you're thinking. At the end of the day, if you're applying to medicine and you're doing the Ucat, I'm sure that you have this sense of making educated guesses. And what I mean by that is that some answers will be way off what you're thinking, and some, like 2 answers, will be like close to what you're thinking or close to what you're coming up with. Now, because you don't have the time to completely work the question out, and you're maybe at the end of the section and you're just running out of time, make a guess. And don't like randomly click, but try and just skim through the question, approximate it in your mind, and I think that in most cases you'll come up with some kind of guess, and hopefully that guess is in the multiple choice. Because remember, it's all multiple choice, so you've always got at least a 25% chance of getting the question right. So make an educated guess is tip number 2. Okay, tip number 3 is to practice under time conditions. Now, I guess in the beginning of your revision for Ucat, you'll probably just familiarize yourself with the questions and sections and kind of how they work. But when you're really getting down to the nitty-gritty of practicing, and it's like hardcore revision time, always practice under time conditions, because as I said, the Ucat isn't hard because of the questions, it's hard because of the time. So I used an online course called Medify, and I did a lot of mock tests on there, and mock tests put me under that pressure, got me used to the interface, got me used to the keyboard shortcuts, and got me thinking like quickly. So I think practicing is good, but practicing under time conditions is even better, because you really need to be on your feet in the test, and whatever happens on the day happens. So you've got to be prepared for that time that you've got. Okay, tip number 4 is to know when you go into the exam what's the absolute maximum time you've allowed yourself to spend on a question. So I think we can put this in an example. So for example, in verbal reasoning, you've got 44 questions that you need to complete in 21 minutes. Okay? Now, if you're spending too long on one question, you're taking away valuable time for questions that are easier. So what you should do is that in your mind, you're gonna say, okay, I'm gonna spend around 30 seconds per question. And if I don't do it in that 30 seconds, then I'm just gonna make an educated guess. And that way you're not wasting time, and hopefully at the end you might have like 30 seconds to go back, and maybe you can spend a bit more time on that question. But essentially, if you're finding a question difficult, I would say move on, or make a guess and move on, or flag it, make a guess and move on. And if you have time at the end, you can always go back, but don't sit too long at one question, because with the Ucat, it's not consistent. There will be questions that are a lot easier than others, and if you're spending time on the harder questions, like you've spent like 2-3 minutes, which doesn't sound like a lot, but it's a lot when it's you actually doing the Ucat, but if you're spending like 2-3 minutes on a question, then you're taking that valuable time away from easier questions that can be done within like under a minute. So I think that you need to have in your mind how much time you're going to spend on each question, and that's different for everyone. Some people might say like 20 seconds per question, and then at the end, because they want to have more time to go review. But for me personally, I think 30 seconds is like, that's the limit for what I use. But essentially, don't spend too long on a question and just move on. Okay, strategy number 5, and this one it's kind of like broken up into pieces, but it'll make sense in a minute. Basically, you need to come up with a plan for every section. So for example, verbal reasoning, your plan is to read the question and then read the passage. Abstract reasoning, your plan is to look for color differences, shape differences, and number differences. Quantitative reasoning, your plan is to make sure that you can do mental maths rather than using the calculator all the time. Essentially, what I'm saying is that you need to try and have a plan about how you're going to approach every section, and by having that, your mind's going to be clear as to what you're going to do, and it's just going to become like muscle memory. You're not going to have to think about what should I look for. You will know that you're looking for color, you're looking for shape, and a lot of these things come with practice, and that's why I always recommend that you actually do practice for the Ucat. A lot of people say that there's no point studying for Ucat because it's like your intelligence and it's just you on the day and you can't improve your score. But I personally don't really agree with that. Yes, it's a difficult test, and yes, it's quite a random test, but that doesn't mean that you can't practice for it, because by practicing for it, you familiarize yourself, you get quicker at the questions, and most importantly, you come up with a plan for every question. So your brain doesn't need to spend that extra energy on planning what to do when the question comes in front of you. So I think that is my tip number 5, and I hope it helps. Alright everybody, hopefully you found this video helpful. That was my top 5 time-saving strategy tips for the Ucat. And I know that a lot of people are sitting the Ucat around this time, so I hope that this video is useful. Please do share it around if you found it useful. I've just been through the process. I'll be starting medicine at the University of Edinburgh in just a couple of weeks now, and I know exactly how you feel. So good luck to everyone, and I'll see you in my next video.